Hi, and welcome back to Focal Point, AFR Talk, the most feared and dangerous talk network in all the land. Second hour, I'm going to play you my appearance with Carol Costello yesterday on CNN. We'll do that an hour from now at the 2:15 Central block. I'll play that and allow you to react to it. I did an interview with Michael Coren up in Canada today. He's got a program called The Arena. Did it via Skype, and we talked at length about Carol Costello's journalistic unprofessionalism. He, as a professional journalist, was just appalled at how Carol Costello treated yours truly, how unprofessionally she handled herself in that interview. We'll play the interview and let you judge for yourself. Now, we want to turn our attention to the debate from last night, and we're going to open up the phone lines early. In fact, we'll open them up right now. 888-589-8840. 888-589-8840 is the number to call if you want to weigh in on the program. And I want to start by playing a soundbite. Let's go to clip number 3 if we can, Rob. Candy Crowley from CNN, same network where my gracious host, Carol Costello, hangs out. She was the moderator last night. She was supposed to be objective, supposed to be neutral. In fact, she was prohibited by the rules of this debate, this town hall debate, from injecting herself in any way in the debate. She was not allowed to ask follow-up questions. She was not allowed to probe. She was not allowed to bring up new topics. That was absolutely verboten, and both camps had agreed to those restrictions. She flatly ignored them. Now, why should she? She's a liberal. And for liberals, the rules, the law, the Constitution, that's stuff for the little people. That's not for them. They're the anointed. They're the elite. They don't have to play by the same rules that you and I, the peons and the peasants, we have to play by the rules, but they don't. And we must understand that they're too exalted to be tied down by the same rules and the same laws that govern the poor plebeians who make up the bulk of our culture. So Candy Crowley, just like President Obama, thinks that she is completely above the law. Now, I'm going to play a lengthy excerpt here. This was kind of the heart of it. This is when they're talking about Libya, and we'll talk a little bit more about this as the program develops. But this is an extended exchange between Governor Romney and Barack Obama. It's a longer soundbite than we normally do, but I want you to hear the whole thing, and I want you to listen for the way that Candy Crowley commits really what I think Rush Limbaugh today, I just saw a headline, called it an act of journalistic terrorism, where she inserts herself not to ask a question, but to take sides. Now, if there's any one thing that an umpire, a referee, is forbidden to do, it's to take sides. Now, it turns out in the 3 debates we've had so far, the Democrat candidate has spoken for a greater amount of time than the Republican candidate in every single one of these debates. Now, let's see. Let me give you the figures here. In the first debate, Barack Obama spoke for 3 minutes and 14 seconds more than Romney. That's 8% more talking time than Romney got. And last night, Joe Biden spoke for 3% more of the time than Paul Ryan. Last night, Obama spoke for 4 minutes and 18 seconds longer than Romney, had an 11% advantage, and that's Candy Crowley's responsibility. It's her job to watch the clock. In fact, that's one of her jobs, is to cut these candidates off if they go over time. She didn't do it. She repeatedly allowed Barack Obama to go over his allotted time. So here they're talking about Libya. And remember, the president had said the day after the attack on the Libyan consulate that this was a mob reaction to an internet video. Now, later in his remarks in the Rose Garden, he used the phrase, "No acts of terror will stop us from defending ourselves," or whatever. Acts of terror, plural. He was speaking generally. He'd spent a long time talking about the fact this was a mob reaction to this movie. But we need to understand in general that no acts of terror are going to deter us from defending ourselves. He did not call what happened at the consulate an act of terror. I mean, the initial matrix that the White House and the entire administration used was this was a spontaneous uprising, a mob uprising, understandable outrage because of this video. So Governor Romney and President Obama spar over this last night with Candy Crowley as the umpire, stepping out of the umpire's box, getting into the batter's box, and taking a swing at a pitch herself. Here's how the exchange went.
Your Secretary of State, as I'm sure you know, has said that she takes full responsibility for the attack on the diplomatic mission in Benghazi. Does the buck stop with your Secretary of State as far as what went on here?
No. Secretary Clinton has done an extraordinary job, but she works for me. I'm the president, and I'm always responsible. And that's why nobody's more interested in finding out exactly what happened than I did. The day after the attack, Governor, I stood in the Rose Garden and I told the American people and the world that we were going to find out exactly what happened, that this was an act of terror, and I also said that we're going to hunt down those who committed this crime. And then a few days later, I was there greeting the caskets coming into Andrews Air Force Base and grieving with the families. And the suggestion that anybody in my team, whether the Secretary of State, our UN ambassador, anybody on my team would play politics or mislead when we've lost 4 of our own, Governor, is offensive. That's not what we do. That's not what I do as president. That's not what I do as commander-in-chief.
Governor, if you want to reply quickly to this, please.
I certainly do. I think it's interesting the president just said something which is that on the day after the attack, he went to the Rose Garden and said that this was an act of terror.
That's what I said.
You said in the Rose Garden, the day after the attack, it was an act of terror. It was not a spontaneous demonstration. Is that what you're saying?
Please proceed, Governor.
I want to make sure we get that for the record, because it took the president 14 days before he called the attack in Benghazi an act of terror.
Get the transcript.
He did, in fact, sir. So let me call it an act of terror.
Can you say that a little louder, Candy?
He did call it an act of terror. It did as well take 2 weeks or so for the whole idea of there being a riot out there about this tape to come out. You're correct about that.
The administration indicated that this was a reaction to a video and was a spontaneous reaction.
They did.
It took them a long time to say this was a terrorist act by a terrorist group. And to suggest, am I incorrect in that regard? On Sunday, your secretary, the ambassador of the United Nations went on the Sunday television shows and spoke about how this was a spontaneous reaction.
I'm happy to have a longer conversation about foreign policy.
Absolutely, but I want to move you on.
She tells Governor Romney to sit down. And you heard the crowd start clapping. Michelle Obama was leading the parade. And they were not clapping for something that Barack Obama said. They were clapping, they were applauding for something that Candy Crowley said on President Obama's behalf. That's how unprofessional she was in her responsibility. Now, Barack Obama's story today is, hey, I called this an act of terror on the second day. I was out there calling this an act. He did not. He used the plural acts of terror toward the close of his speech, a general statement about the response of the United States. He did not call what happened to the Libya consulate an act of terror. Didn't want to call it that because he didn't want to blame the Muslims. He doesn't want to blame the Muslims for anything. He wanted to blame the filmmaker. This was all about the filmmaker. It was his fault, inexcusable. He's denigrating a great religion. Well, there's understandable outrage. We can understand it. We understand why they're so ticked off. That was the meme. Now, here he is. This is at the UN. This is clip 4. This is Barack Obama at the United Nations 2 weeks later. Now, last night, he's trying to tell the American people, hey, I called this puppy an act of terror the day after. Here he is 2 weeks after the attack on the consulate, addressing the UN, and listen to where he places the blame before the UN September 26.
In every country, there are those who find different religious beliefs threatening. In every culture, those who love freedom for themselves must ask themselves how much they're willing to tolerate freedom for others. And that is what we saw play out in the last 2 weeks. As a crude and disgusting video sparked outrage throughout the Muslim world. Now, I have made it clear that the United States government had nothing to do with this video. And I believe its message must be rejected by all who respect our common humanity. It is an insult not only to Muslims, but to America as well. For as the city outside these walls makes clear, we are a country that has welcomed people of every race and every faith. We are home to Muslims who worship across our country. We not only respect the freedom of religion, we have laws that protect individuals from being harmed because of how they look or what they believe. We understand why people take offense to this video because millions of our citizens are among them.
So that's Barack Obama telling the UN, hey, this wasn't an act of terror. This wasn't a act of jihad. This was an act of understandable outrage prompted by this video. Now, Candy Crowley, this is clip 5, she started to walk herself back almost right away. She realized she'd stepped in it. And here she's trying to cover her tracks. She knows she committed a huge, major journalistic act of malpractice. Here she is, in the after debate, trying to walk back what she had done to Mitt Romney and for Barack Obama. Let's listen.
You know, again, I heard the president's speech at the time. I sort of reread a lot of stuff about Libya because I knew we'd probably get a Libya question, so I kind of wanted to be up on it. So I knew that the president had said, you know, these acts of terror won't stand, or whatever the whole quote was.
Didn't know what the quote
I
is.
think actually, you know, because right after that, I did turn around and say, but you're totally correct that they spent 2 weeks telling us this was about a tape and that there was this riot outside the Benghazi consulate, which there wasn't. So he was right in the main. I just think he picked the wrong word.
What was the wrong word? What was the wrong word that he picked? What was the wrong word? She doesn't say what the wrong word was. So obviously Candy Crowley realized, whoops, I just stepped in it big time. I've got to go back and I've got to cover my tracks. And she says, I don't even know what the whole quote was. These acts of terror won't stand, or whatever the whole quote was. The quote was no acts of terror. That was the actual quote. So she said, that's homework. I don't even know what he said. Focal Point AFR Talk.